Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, and I think it is fair to say that this brewery is best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. They've had a lot of plaudits for these in recent times. The beer that we're going to have a look at today though is somewhat of a different style, and it is one that I've actually tried on tap. We had this one at the Bishop's Arms in Gustav Adolf's Torrey, and it was quite interesting. So I'm curious to see how it's going to turn out in can actually. So hopefully it is as good as I remember it on tap, and yeah, hopefully it lives up to the standards that we expect of this brewery. So yeah, let's see what we have with this one. For this review, we are going to head to Örebro, which is out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Apex Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the Keller Märzen. It comes in at 5.6% ABV, and from the name, I think you can guess what kind of beer this is. So a Keller lager, of course, tends to be a more kind of yeasty lager beer, and the Märzen is one of the numerous types of lager that you'll find in Germany. Yeah, usually a bit more caramelly and biscuity and things like that, and a little bit stronger in alcohol too. So the Keller Märzen is quite an interesting combination, I have to say. I've seen a couple of these about in recent times. But yeah, always nice to return it to Apex Brewing Company. About a year ago, we reviewed the Killer Pils, which I thought was very, very good. So yeah, curious to have a look again at the Keller Märzen. So let's crack on and see what we have. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex before, and we will no doubt add more to that in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel, and as always, you can check out the list of beers from different countries, and you will find this one in the Swedish playlist. So yeah, let's have a little look at the brewery notes then, and we can have a look at the beer. So Apex Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, were originally based in Nora, which is to the north of Örebro, and they were founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchitz and Niklas Lundgren. Both of these guys are musicians, and Niklas played in the band 59 Times the Pain, whereas Daniel played in The Voice of a Generation. But Daniel and Niklas are responsible for the brewing operations, although there are a few others involved in the company who are on the kind of business side of the business, if that makes sense. So there's Leif Carlson, Ola Eriksson, and Roger Hjelm. So they started off with a 500 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks, and they were selling their beers in the local area before they got them into Systembolaget. If I remember rightly, it was the single hop that was the first one they got into Systembolaget, and I reviewed that way back in about 2019 or so, actually. But in 2018, they brewed around 35,000 litres of beer across the whole year with about 25 different varieties, all of which were pretty much New England IPAs, and they brewed about 120,000 litres the following year in 2019. Over the coming years, or over the following years we should say, they continued to expand the brewery. They exported their beers a little bit, and then eventually they outgrew their original premises. In the summer of 2021, they announced that they would move to a new premises in the Baytorp district of Örebro that autumn, and this brewery saw them upgrade, or this move saw them upgrade their 500 litre brew kit to a 2,000 litre brew kit, and they've also acquired many new fermentation tanks as a result of that, and they're starting to try different styles and things too, which is quite exciting. But as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 115 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. But like I said earlier, they are best known for their New England hazy IPAs, but they are trying a few lagers, and I think they've got plans to do a few Berliner Weisses and stuff like that. But I would love to see these guys do a proper old school West Coast IPA or a black IPA. Would be an interesting proposition from them as well. Maybe they'll do a cold IPA, because those are all the rage just now. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Apex Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's have a little look at the beer itself then. That's all we need to talk about for the history of this one. So once again, it is a 440 milliliter can. As you can see, it's quite similar actually in terms of its artwork to the Keller Pils. It has the music, people, and beer on it. And yeah, you can see there is the Apex ABC thing. in the top there. So as we said earlier, this one comes in at 5.6% ABV. It is a lager beer, so the basic definition of a lager is that it uses a bottom fermenting yeast. That is a yeast that ferments between about 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. Lagers, of course, have cold fermentations, which is why a number of them used to be fermented in Kellers or cellars, as they were, hence the name Keller. But a Keller beer usually is a more kind of yeasty lager beer. You've got the Zwickel, the Land beers, the Kellers, you've got Zeugels as well, which I believe might actually kind of fit into that category as well from the Oberpfalz region. But the Märzen is quite an interesting style of lager. It is more kind of amber in colour. It tends to be a little bit stronger as well, a little bit more kind of biscuity in its flavour. But the Märzens were brewed in March because in Germany back in the day, you could not brew beer during the summer months. It was illegal and it was also too hot. And so these beers were actually the Märzen beer was brewed in March and put into the Kellers and left until October, and that is why they became the Oktoberfest beers. The Märzen is the style of Oktoberfest. That is the basic story behind that. But yeah, so this one we have a Keller beer, so a big kind of yeasty thing, and it's also a Märzen lager too. But yeah, as we said, at 5.6% ABV, this should be quite nice. You can see plain silver top on the can there. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. Looking forward to this. Yeah, so not sure exactly when this beer was released through Systembolaget. I think it might have been, I don't know if this was released for August or July, but like I said, I've got a few beers that have been kind of lying around that I'm just working through at the very beginning of September. But regardless, I'm sure when it's a Keller Märzen, it will hold up quite well for a wee bit. It'll be a bit better than in a bit better condition than some of the IPAs we might have been having from Apex recently. Yeah, because they had been, IPAs, you really do need to drink those within a couple of weeks. But yeah, anyway, in terms of a Keller Märzen, this looks quite interesting. So, yeah. So before the head disappears on this one, you can see that it's poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. There are elements of bumpiness to this one as well, which I think is pretty good. But you can see it's got that lovely kind of rich amber colour to it. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put into the beer will affect the colour of it too. But yeah, in this case, I think it mainly is down to the type of malt. And you don't often have to care about barrel aging and adjuncts when it comes to different lager beers. But you can see this one is crystal clear. It's just pretty much the fermentation that's... it is pretty much just the condensation, not the fermentation. Brain is not working. It's pretty much just the condensation that you can see on the edge of the glass. But in terms of what you would expect from pretty much any Märzen, I think this comes together quite nicely. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, like I said, and a few little ones just going up toward the bottom of the head. The head, incidentally, has just faded away to be a very thin foamy layer, and around the edge of the glass you've got that nice ring. So yeah, nice foamy ring. But other than that, I don't think we need to say any more about the appearance of this one. We can get on and have a little look at the aroma. But I have to say, I would expect, a Keller Märzen, you would expect it to be a little bit more kind of hazy and things. So what we're going to do, we'll put the rest of it in now and just see if that changes the appearance. And there's no I will say there's no visible sediment on the bottom of the can with this one. So yeah, it's not quite as hazy as you might expect. You would expect a good little bit of natural haze from a Keller beer of any description. But we'll have a wee look at the aroma now and see what we get out of it. I mean, straight away it kind of actually just smells like a straight up Märzen. Now when it comes to these Märzen lagers, we should point out that there are a few other kind of similar styles to the Märzen. So the Märzen we've explained quite in depth already, but you would also have the Czech Letsak, which is the Czech amber lager, and you probably could argue that the Vienna lager is quite similar to this as well. The Bock isn't a million miles away either, and the Bock, of course, is a lager beer that comes from Einbeck. They took it to Munich, and the Münchners made fun of the Einbeckers' accent, so it became known as the Bock, and that's why they have the goat on them. But the Letsak is quite an interesting one. The Keller Märzen, in terms of its flavour profile, wouldn't be a million miles away from the Czech late sack. Generally speaking, for me, German lagers tend to be a little bit kind of cleaner and more kind of crisp, whereas the Czech ones tend to be a little bit more kind of yeasty and things. So yeah, Keller Märzen, theoretically speaking, should not be a million miles away from a Czech late sack. But with this one, this is one of the sweeter Märzens I've come across in recent times. It comes across as very, very clean, very sweet. You've just got a nice kind of light green component to it, but it's also quite oily in its fruity characteristics as well. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. But let's break the aroma down for you a wee bit more and just describe it more in depth. And I have to be careful that I don't spill this one, because I did choose to fill it right to the rim, just to see if it was going to get a bit more haziness. But yeah, aroma wise, the malty backbone of this is quite nice. You get a little bit of that fresh brown bread crust in there. On top of that, there's a mix of like fresh white bread and kind of more wholemeally, almost German rye bread notes to this. It really has quite a nice little bit of sweetness to it, which I do enjoy. Yeah, lovely mix of. Yeah, it's absolutely got a little bit of bread crust, but it also has a good little bit of it does also have a good little bit of it has that just brighter white bread to it. So yeah, fresh, almost hedgehog roll bread crust, bit of wholemeal rye bread character on top of that. Then you're getting some straight up white bread out of this one, so that's kind of interesting. The brown sugar does actually have a little bit of an unusual characteristic to it as well. So yeah, you've got a bit of an oily caramel in there, a wee bit of a kind of biscuity note as well, and it's also got a slight little bit of toastiness. So I do quite like how that goes together for sure. So yeah, oily caramel, bit of biscuit, and then a little bit of a toasty note to it. But the bready character that comes out of this one, I think in this, it almost gives it a little touch that you get a little bit of the dryness out of the bready character, which almost gives you a wee bit of a kind of Vienna lager type quality. Vienna lagers, the brown sugars are a bit darker. They're not quite as sweet and oily in this, but yeah, you do get that dry bread crusty note. There are one or two little woody notes out of it, which I do enjoy. And yeah, I do like that actually. With this one, it's quite a sweet Märzen for sure. Other than that, I don't know if there's anything else we need to say about the malty and kind of yeasty side of the beer. So yeah, aroma wise, it is quite interesting. Yeah, I think that's everything. That is everything we need to say about the malty yeasty side of the beer. On the hoppy kind of things, it is pretty much what you'd expect. I would suspect this is maybe German hops that are in here, but could be wrong. But you do get a little bit of a smooth earthiness out of this one. It's got the nice bright green component as well. It leans more toward the grassy side of things rather than anything else, and it's the brightness that makes me think it's German hops that are in this. If they were Czech hops, they'd be a little bit more kind of spicy. If they were Slovenian hops, they would just be that little bit smoother. You can kind of, the Slovenian Styrian Goldings just have this real smoothness to them. But yeah, lovely smooth earthiness, a little bit of herbal character. Then you have got just a bit of that bright floral aromaticity and a wee bit of grassness there. The grassy character actually has a little bit of zesty. It actually has a little bit of zestiness to it as well. So yeah, aroma wise, this is quite nice. Yeah, so I think on the fruity side of things too, it's got the fruity character is really interesting because it's also very bright and oily in that regard. So you've got a little bit of a kind of, I would say, you do have a wee touch of kind of sultana character to this one, but for me it's got this lovely big oily peary character to it. Lots of big lovely oily pear. Definitely has a wee bit of an almost, yeah, definitely sultana. Sultana and pear are the dominant ones in here, but you do get a little bit of a kind of slightly green apple out of it. But yeah, big oily pear and big sultana notes. I really like how this goes together. It's awesome. It really is very, very nice. So yeah, I think it gets a big thumbs up from me. This. So yeah, this is the the Keller Märzen, 5.6% ABV from Apex Brewing. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma before you get stuck into it. But I think we should taste this one now. So yeah, Sláinte, skål, cheers. Yeah. Now, this is interesting for me. I'm going to say straight away that this is a lot better in the can than it was on tap. When we had it on tap, personally, I felt that there was something, it had more yeasty character coming out of it, which is what you would expect from a Keller Märzen. You would expect that. But the yeastiness gave it this almost kind of granola-y, grainy type character. You start to get a little, I can feel with this one, you start to get a little bit of that in the aftertaste. You do get a little bit of that, but it was, when we had it on tap, it was almost dominating the flavour, whereas this gives you a bit more of the kind of cleanliness and sweetness and stuff that you would want from a Märzen. This one actually feels more like a Märzen than the one that we had on tap did, and it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but yeah, for me, this is more what I would want from a Märzen. So I would say with this beer, I think the canned beer, the canned version is a bit better than the tapped version. But yeah, that is quite nice, this one. The other thing that I point out that is quite surprised about this is that when it's so clear, you can really get the Keller notes out of it, because you would expect a Keller beer to normally be kind of unfiltered, and this beer obviously is filtered. You would expect that from it, but you really get those kind of Kellery flavours in the aftertaste as well, which is quite interesting. It takes a little bit of time to show its true colours, if you like this one, but I like this. This, for me, in the can, it's a lot better than it was on the tap, for sure. Yeah, that is really nice. But yeah, let's break this down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth then. So, middle third of your palate, it's kind of as we described in the aroma. You've got a good little bit of that kind of grainy, brown bready bread crust with this one. So yeah, you can feel that that hedgehog brown bready roll there, that's forming the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you've got a nice little bit of a wholemeal brown bread character. It almost has a wee bit of a German rye bread note. I miss the bakeries that we used to have in Heidelberg when I was living there. I loved going to the bakeries and getting fresh bread. It's just awesome. But yeah, for me, that fresh bread crust, the kind of wholemealy brown bread that sits in there, is very, very nice. But on top of that, as the flavour progresses, you start to get a little bit of woodiness out of it and a little bit of nuttiness almost, and that's toward the front of that middle third of the palate. But on top of that, you certainly have a wee bit of you have a little bit of kind of white bread for sure, a little bit of a fresh white bread, and that kind of sits there into the aftertaste too. But in the middle of the tongue, you're getting the kind of sweeter brown sugary notes that you would expect of the Märzen. So let's just look at that. It's almost like a kind of circle in the middle of your palate. So if you go into the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that straight up oily caramel. That's kind of sitting there. But it has a little bit of that kind of dryness to it as well, which is interesting. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of oily you've got that nice kind of oily caramel there in the middle, but then as you move further out from that, it starts to get gradually more and more biscuity, and the brown sugars just have this slightly toasty dryness to them as well, and that just moves further and further out. As you move toward the extremities of that middle third of your palate, you start to get more of that kind of brown sugary dryness. And again, I quite like how that goes together in this particular beer. But yeah, that is nice. Other than that, I don't think there's anything really to say about the middle third of the palate. I think that we've covered it. Back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of that bready build up there. It gets to be more kind of grainy and like an airy brown wholemeal bread, but the base of the back third of the palate, the bread crust gets a lot drier and a lot more grainy. On top of that, you've got a more fluffy, you do have a more fluffy wholemeal brown bready sort of thing. Then on top of that, you start to get the yeasty characteristics coming out of it. So it's got a little bit more of a kind of crackery, Jacob's cream crackery sort of thing. And yeah, a little bit of that woody farmhousey kind of note. And that, again, that's a kind of characteristic you can pick up from these Keller lager beers, that you do, the yeastiness of course will be where most of the Keller characteristics are coming from. So yeah, you definitely get more of that Keller activity on the back third of the palate, and as you go further into the aftertaste in the palate, it is a little bit more obvious there in the middle third of the tongue. But yeah, back third of the palate, it is, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. Then as you come into the middle third of the palate, it just condenses down a wee bit and squashes more together. But yeah, I do like how this pieces together. This beer gets a big thumbs up from me on the malty and yeasty side of things. Let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. Yeah, so back corners of the palate, you get a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a touch more herbal, and as you push toward the front corners of the palate, it gives you just a little bit of floral character. What I would say about the green component in the flavour though is that it is actually quite wet. Like, I really do get quite a little bit of wetness out of this one. And I actually do enjoy that, to be honest. I like the wetness that you get out of this beer from that perspective. But round the front curve of the palate, it is definitely lighter and grassy. There's a teeny little bit of zestiness to it, but yeah, it's quite a wet grassiness that you get out of this beer, and I'm pretty sure it is, you know, just with the brightness you get from it, I'm pretty sure it is German hops that have been used in this beer. Although in fairness, the more in the flavour, it does have a little bit more of the smoothness, so it could be Slovenian ones, you never know. But I think when they're calling it Keller Märzen, it's a very German name, so most likely that they've used German hops in this. Other than that, I don't think we need to say anything more about the green component of this, so let's focus on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up there. So yeah, you get a nice little bit of that kind of brown bready sort of thing. Then the base of the front third of your palate is a little bit more kind of smooth and brown bready. There's a wee bit of crackery character in there, little bits of woody flavour as well, I would say. But on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So toward the back of that, toward the back of that front third of your palate, you do get these nice kind of sultana-y flavours. There's almost a little bit of date to this one as well, but yeah, you get that kind of sultana, you know, that dry white green grapey kind of character coming out of it, a little bit of date in there, but then yeah, there's a little tiny touch of a sort of dry apricot note. But then yeah, as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's more kind of oily and peary as well. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. It does go about its business in a really nice way, this one. I think the more that I drink of it, the more I start to get the kind of sweeter side of the beer out, and that just works. I do think it goes together nicely in that sense. Is there anything else we want to say about the fruity side of the beer? No, I think sultana's a little bit of dried apricot, then an oily, then yeah, kind of oily, peary sort of flavour to it. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me for sure. I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour profile of this one. So let's just round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, mouthfeel wise for me, this one, it has I would say it's kind of top end of light bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth in this one. It's actually a very clean, slightly oily leaning beer. IBU wise, I think it's about 20, 25. You do get a bit of dryness out of this one, and there's a bit of a thing in this beer distinguishing between the kind of malty and yeasty dryness and the hoppy bitterness. They kind of go hand in hand. So it gives you the impression that it might be a little bit more bitter than it is, but it does have that wee bit of dryness. But yeah, lovely smooth and slightly dry malty character to it, the big sweetness as we've said in the malt base. But yeah, you've got these nice big oily, fruity characteristics coming out of this one too. But overall, it gets a big thumbs up for me, and I do think the canned version is a bit better than the keg version that we had in the pub, I have to say. But yeah, it gets a big thumbs up for me, this one, and I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again in the can. The tap, I'm not sure what exactly went on with that one. It wasn't our lines and stuff. Our lines are always very clean, but yeah, maybe they need to work on the keg conditioning of this a little bit more. Who knows? But yeah, I enjoyed this. It's nice to try a beer, to have a little taster of it on tap and then try the thing out of the can. But yeah, a very nice Märzen lager beer for me, this one. It kind of, the yeasty side gives you the Märzen, but otherwise it is a very clean, straight up, the yeasty side gives you the Keller, I should say, but the Märzen side is very obvious in this one. It's got a lovely clean German Märzen type quality to it. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex Brewing Company as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very near future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out Apex social media. This one was the Keller Märzen at 6.5% ABV. Slange it, skull, and cheers.